Good evening, dear listeners. You've ventured back into the shadowy realm of our scary stories. I'm your guide, leading you through the dimly lit corridors of the unknown, the mysterious, the macabre. Brace yourselves, as tonight we delve into the heart of ancient legend and present-day terror. It's a place where reality warps and the line between the living and the paranormal blurs. So, extinguish your lights, let the silence embrace you, and let the chill take hold. You're about to embark on a journey you won't easily forget. On the cold, crisp evening of a late October, renowned paranormal investigator Alex Riddle found himself staring at the strange, cryptic number flashing on his office phone. The call was from the isolated Moonlight Reservation tucked away in the arms of the Sierra Nevadas. The wind whistled in from his open window, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the promise of a late autumn rain. Riddle's office was a sanctuary of order amidst chaos, walls lined with certificates of his well-earned renown and meticulously organized notes of past investigations. Outside, the city was a vibrant medley of lights and noises, but inside, a silence prevailed, punctuated only by the strident ringing of the telephone. A deep, ragged voice spilled from the receiver when Riddle answered. It belonged to a man named John, a local from the Moonlight Reservation. His voice trembled with barely suppressed fear, setting the hairs on Riddle's arms on end. "We need you, Mr. Riddle," John implored. His breath hitched on the other end, as if he was fighting back the sob lodged in his throat. The howling, the curse, it's taking us one by one. Even through the comforting fortress of his office, Riddle felt a chill, a prickling sense of trepidation. It wasn't the first desperate call he had received, but something about John's voice, the raw terror seeping through, stuck with him. After ending the call, Riddle swiveled his chair to gaze out of the window. The skyline stretched before him, skyscrapers reaching out towards the indigo expanse. Soon he would exchange this urban jungle for the reservation's barren wilderness. He closed his eyes, and in the silence of his office, he could almost hear the whispering winds of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The hum of the city faded away, replaced by the imagined distant howling that seemed to call his name. Alex Riddle sat there, wrestling with the fear creeping into the corners of his seasoned heart. He was a man built on logic and facts, a man who looked into the eyes of the unexplained and found answers. But as he prepared to step into the moonlit curse of the reservation, he could not shake off the dread carried on John's desperate voice. For the first time in a long time, Alex Riddle was afraid. As the winds outside his window picked up, foretelling a storm, Riddle steeled himself. He may not know what awaited him at the Moonlight Reservation, but he had never backed down from a challenge before. And he wasn't about to start now. The city gave one last sigh before being drowned by the clamoring rain. In the heart of this storm, one man prepared for his journey into the unknown. And as the last echoes of John's call rang in his ears, the silence of his office was broken once more, replaced by the resonance of a distant, haunting howl that would soon become all too real. Alex Riddle's journey took him away from the bustling city, through the winding mountainous roads of Sierra Nevada, and finally to the secluded Moonlight Reservation. The sights of skyscrapers were replaced by towering pines scraping the heavens, and rolling meadows undulating like a green sea in the wind. The air held a biting chill, carrying the pine's tangy scent mingled with the raw smell of the wild. Riddle's car hummed quietly, disrupting the stillness that had claimed the landscape. As he drove into the reservation, he was struck by its stark isolation, a few scattered homes, a general store, and a threadbare community center. Yet it was the silence that held him captive, a silence that seemed to echo the haunting loneliness of the landscape, punctuated only by the mournful sigh of the wind. John, the man who had called him, was waiting outside a worn wooden cabin. His weathered face was as hard as the land itself, and his eyes held an intense mix of relief and trepidation as Riddle pulled up. "The folks here are spooked," John admitted as they walked into the cabin, the wooden floor creaking under their weight. Inside, the warm scent of burning wood from the fireplace offered a faint comfort against the cold. The cozy room was filled with the murmuring of locals, their faces etched with lines of worry and fear. A hush descended as they noticed Riddle's entrance. Each person shared their chilling tales, their voices a low murmur against the crackling fire. Stories of loved ones acting out of character, of unearthly howls tearing through the silence of the night, and eerie sightings in the surrounding woods painted a haunting picture. When an old woman, Ada, spoke up, her voice trembled like wind-shaken leaves. She told of her grandson, once cheerful and lively, now possessed by an unnatural quietude after an encounter in the forest. His eyes, they aren't his anymore. They're dark, cold, and the howl, it comes from him. Outside, as if to confirm their fears, a long, eerie howl sliced through the evening air. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees, and Riddle felt a chill skittering up his spine. He gazed out the frost-kissed window. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of purple and gold, but the beauty of the vista was lost on him. Riddle had arrived expecting ghost stories and local folklore, but the fear etched on the faces of the people, the tremor in their voices, and the howl threading through the wind were deeply unsettling. As the light dwindled and shadows began to pool in the corners of the room, he felt an icy knot of dread form in his stomach. Moonlight Reservation was caught in a grip of a haunting fear, and Riddle, the outsider, could feel it sinking its icy claws into him. As he met the fear-laden gazes of the locals, he knew the real investigation had begun. With the chilling howl reverberating in his ears, Riddle steeled himself for the long, daunting night that lay ahead. He was in the heart of the Skinwalker's domain, and the true nature of the curse was slowly coming to light. As dawn cracked the night open, spilling golden light over the Moonlight Reservation, Alex Riddle stood at the edge of the sprawling forest that held the community in a grip of fear. He watched the first rays of sunlight pierce the dense canopy of towering pines and ancient oaks. Yet the forest, bathed in the gentle morning light, held an uncanny stillness that the warm glow could not soften. John joined him, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. Their breaths frosted in the chilly morning air, carrying with it the bitter tang of black coffee and the damp scent of dew-kissed earth. Together, they ventured into the woods, stepping onto a path that was more memory than trail in John's mind. The forest whispered around them, the wind rustling through the leaves, creating a melody that was both serene and unsettling. Each crunch of dried leaves under their boots, each snap of a twig echoed like a loud proclamation in the otherwise quiet woods. The air was cool and damp, smelling of pine and moss, carrying the faint, elusive scent of decay. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence seemed. John led him to a clearing where most sightings had occurred. The space was strangely devoid of the typical forest clutter. The undergrowth was thin, and the trees around seemed to lean away, as if in fear. In this clearing, the morning sunlight seemed dull, the air denser. Suddenly, John stiffened, pointing towards a tree on the edge of the clearing. There, claw marks marred the bark, deep gashes that looked eerily like fingers trying to grip. Further ahead, they discovered the remains of a deer. The carcass was a grotesque sight, and the sickly sweet smell of decay was overwhelming. Riddle examined the scene, the oddly precise mutilation, the sense of dread that clung to the air. It was clear this was not the work of a regular predator. He felt an icy shiver of realization crawl up his spine. There was indeed something unnatural at play here. As they exited the forest, Riddle couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that they were being watched, that their every step was shadowed by unseen eyes. He turned back to glance at the silent, brooding woods one last time. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a flicker of movement in the undergrowth, a fleeting shadow that was there 1 second and gone the next. A haunted forest of the Moonlight Reservation held on to its secrets, offering only chilling hints. As they made their way back, the eerie silence of the woods felt like a mocking salute to their departure. Now, standing at the mouth of the forest, gazing into its depth, Riddle knew that he had ventured into the realm of the extraordinary. The realization was as chilling as the haunting silence of the woods, the chilling evidence, and the fear etched in the eyes of the locals. Alex Riddle, the man of facts and logic, was standing at the precipice of an inexplicable abyss, staring into the eyes of the Skinwalker's curse. In the days that followed, Alex Riddle immersed himself in the life of the Moonlight Reservation. He spoke to the locals, noted their experiences, and visited the homes of those reportedly affected by the curse. Each tale added a new layer to the chilling symphony of fear that had gripped this secluded community. One such visit led him to Ada's home, where he met her grandson, Tom. Tom was barely 17, yet his eyes held an age far beyond his years. They were the same eyes Ada had described, the once lively spark replaced by a cold, vacant stare. He sat rigidly on the edge of a threadbare couch, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Tom's transformation was shocking. When Riddle asked him to recount his encounter in the forest, Tom's voice came out as a barely audible whisper, as if the memory itself was too painful to bear. I heard the howl, then darkness, and when I woke, I was home, he murmured. His gaze remained distant, lost in the terror of his fragmented memory. Riddle noted Tom's tight grip on an old charm, a simple, circular pendant etched with intricate symbols, a protective amulet that had belonged to his grandfather. Ada informed Riddle that Tom never parted with it since that ominous day in the forest. Riddle couldn't help but wonder if this small piece of metal was Tom's lifeline, a desperate grasp at some semblance of safety amidst the chaos. Nightfall brought a new kind of dread over the reservation. Shadows stretched across the homes, consuming the last remnants of the dying day. As the community retreated into their homes, silence descended like a shroud, only to be broken by the skinwalker's howl, a sound that was beginning to echo in Riddle's dreams. One night, as Riddle walked the quiet lanes, the howl sliced through the silence, reverberating through the air. It was closer this time, a clear and terrifying affirmation of the skinwalker's presence. He felt a chill creeping along his spine, making his hair stand on end. Suddenly, an intense sensation pricked him, a feeling of being watched, just as he had felt in the forest. The moon bathed the desolate landscape in an ethereal glow as Riddle turned slowly, scanning the surroundings. For a moment, his heart seemed to freeze in his chest. There, at the edge of his vision, was a shadow. A figure stood, slightly hunched, blending with the darkness, just for a split second before disappearing into the night. The fleeting encounter, the shadowy figure, and the chilling howl that hung in the air, everything seemed to fall into a horrifying picture. As he returned to his temporary home, the usually comforting fireplace's warmth did little to ease the cold knot of dread in his stomach. Every ticking second, every whispered tale, every sign of the skinwalker's curse only pulled Riddle deeper into the mystery. The seasoned investigator found himself walking a thin line between reality and the supernatural, with the haunting howl of the skinwalker as his unnerving companion. A week had passed since Riddle arrived at Moonlight Reservation. In this short span, he had witnessed the fear that the skinwalker's curse had sown in the hearts of the community. He had listened to the terrifying tales, seen the evidence, and had felt the chilling presence himself. Yet, Riddle was still trying to piece together the horrifying jigsaw of events. On a night when the moon was veiled behind clouds, Riddle, accompanied by John, ventured into the haunted forest again. The nocturnal excursion carried a different kind of dread. The usually whispering wind was silent, the rustling leaves were still, and an ominous darkness consumed the woods. Their torchlight cut through the pitch blackness, casting long shadows that danced around them. The chill in the air was biting, seeping through their jackets. The smell of damp earth, decaying leaves, and pine hung heavily around them. They stopped at the same clearing where the evidence of the skinwalker's curse was glaring. In the torchlight, the claw marks looked more menacing, and the silence of the clearing felt more oppressive. As Riddle ran his fingers over the gouged bark, a shudder ran through him. Suddenly, a horrifying scream ripped through the silence. It came from the direction of the reservation. The blood-curdling sound was filled with such terror that it froze Riddle and John in their tracks. They rushed back, their hearts pounding in their chests, their breaths coming out in ragged pants. When they reached the reservation, chaos had taken hold. A crowd was huddled outside Tom's home. Riddle pushed his way through, his heart sinking as he entered the house. The sight that met his eyes was bone-chilling. Tom was writhing on the floor, a terrible howl escaping his lips, the same howl that haunted the reservation. His eyes were wide, a terrifying mix of fear and agony swirling within them. Riddle could only watch in silent horror as Tom's body arched in an unnatural way, the howl tearing through the air. Ada was at a corner, her frail body shaking, tears streaming down her face. The room was filled with an unbearable terror that clung to everyone present. As the howl faded and Tom's body stilled, a petrifying silence claimed the room. Riddle stood rooted to the spot, the image of Tom's twisted form and the resonating howl burned into his mind. A horrifying spectacle was a stark revelation. The skinwalker's curse was real, and its howl had indeed claimed a vessel. As Riddle left Tom's home, the wind whipped past, carrying the echoes of the skinwalker's howl. Looking up at the clouded moon, he knew he was in a terrifying race against an enemy he was yet to understand fully. The haunting image of Tom's ordeal filled him with a newfound determination. The skinwalker's curse was not just a chilling tale. It was a horrifying reality that he had to confront. In the aftermath of the horrifying incident at Tom's home, the Moonlight Reservation was blanketed in a deeper shade of fear. The community that had once thrived on camaraderie and shared stories now held their breath in a shared terror. A terror embodied in the skinwalker's bone-chilling screams. Riddle's subsequent days were a flurry of activity. He buried himself in the old tales, hunting for answers in the eerie legends of the skinwalker that the community elders had shared. He combed through every detail, every symbol, every ritual related to the skinwalker, his usual clinical detachment giving way to an urgency. One evening, while poring over a collection of handwritten accounts from John's grandfather, a particular detail caught his eye. A symbol, the same symbol that was etched onto Tom's protective charm. This small detail sparked a glimmer of hope, a potential lead amidst the unnerving puzzle. The symbol was related to an ancient ritual performed by the community's elders, designed to offer protection against the skinwalker's curse. It was an old way, forgotten by most, yet holding a potential key to confront the skinwalker's curse. Riddle knew he had to delve deeper into the significance of this ritual, and the power it held. He turned to John, who was a link to the community's past. The elder's eyes lit up with recognition at the sight of the symbol. He explained how his own grandfather used to perform the ritual, calling upon the spirits of the land for protection. However, the ritual had lost its practice over the generations. Determined to unearth the lost practice, Riddle and John ventured deep into the heart of the reservation's history, seeking guidance from the oldest members. Each conversation, each shared memory was a step closer to understanding the forgotten ritual. Meanwhile, the skinwalker's howl echoed more frequently, the chilling sound a constant reminder of the impending threat. As each day passed, the curse grew bolder, the fear grew deeper, and the nights seemed darker. The reservation was living on borrowed time, and Riddle knew he had to act swiftly. By the end of the week, armed with newfound knowledge and a desperate hope, Riddle decided to recreate the protective ritual. John, having discovered a newfound respect for his grandfather's traditions, agreed to assist him. Together, they prepared, unknowing of the challenges that lay ahead. Their decision marked a crucial turning point in the Moonlight Reservation's eerie tale. As Riddle took this bold step into the realm of the forgotten and mysterious, he knew he was challenging an entity beyond his comprehension. Yet, he was fueled by the desperation to save a community from a horrifying fate, even if it meant confronting his own fears. The protective ritual was to be conducted on a moonless night, a night when the skinwalker was believed to be the most potent. The chosen location was the heart of the forest, the very place where Tom had been found after his ordeal, now a chilling testament to the skinwalker's power. As the sun bowed out of the horizon, painting the sky with shades of twilight, a sense of dread and anticipation clung to the very air around the reservation. The community gathered in silent support, watching as Riddle and John embarked on their perilous mission into the darkness. Guided by the soft glow of their torchlights, they navigated through the dense forest. The whispers of leaves and the crunch of the undergrowth beneath their boots echoed in the chilling silence. The faint, earthy scent of pine and moist soil hung heavy around them, mingling with the biting cold that seeped through their clothes. Arriving at the clearing, they began preparing for the ritual. Using chalk, they drew the intricate symbol onto the forest floor, each line a prayer for protection. A small fire was kindled in the center, its crackling flames a solitary source of warmth in the chilling night. John began to chant the ritualistic hymn, his deep voice reverberating through the silence. The words, although foreign to Riddle, carried a certain rhythm, a certain power that seemed to vibrate through the air. Riddle focused on maintaining the fire, the warmth from the flames licking his face providing a momentary relief against the unnerving chill around him. As the ritual progressed, an eerie stillness fell over the forest. The usual night sounds faded into silence, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Then, slicing through the silence came the skinwalker's howl, haunting, terrifying, closer than ever. Riddle felt a cold shiver run down his spine, his heart pounding against his rib cage. The howl seemed to resonate around them, the sound warping with the eerie chant John was invoking. Despite the fear gnawing at his nerves, Riddle stayed rooted, maintaining the fire, maintaining his resolve. Minutes stretched into hours, the chant and the howl intertwining in a chilling symphony. Then, as the howl reached a deafening crescendo, the fire blazed higher, the flames dancing wildly. John's chant grew louder, his voice straining against the overpowering howl. Suddenly, the howl ceased, snuffed out like a candle against the wind. The fire died down, its crackling subdued. John's chant faded, giving way to an all-consuming silence. They waited, the silence pounding in their ears, their breaths held in anticipation. Moments ticked by, the forest remained silent. The skinwalkers' howl did not resonate through the air again that night. As they made their way back, the first hint of dawn painted the sky, the darkness retreating to the corners. They returned to a community brimming with hopeful eyes. That night, for the first time since Riddle had arrived, the Moonlight Reservation slept without the dread of the skinwalkers' howl. It was a small victory, but it bore a glimmer of hope, the first ray of dawn against the horrifying darkness. The dawn of a new day brought a wave of cautious optimism to the Moonlight Reservation. The absence of the skinwalkers' dreaded howl the previous night was a beacon of hope in the harrowing darkness that had befallen the community. But this sense of peace, as Riddle was soon to discover, was deceptive and transient. In the days that followed, Riddle diligently maintained his investigative routine. He kept close tabs on the community members, in particular on Tom, who had fallen mysteriously silent since his ordeal. There was a ghost of the once jovial man in the withdrawn figure that now resided in Tom's body. The transformation was a grim reminder of the skinwalker's brutal power. Yet the reservation was quiet. Too quiet. There were no incidents, no eerie howls shattering the silence of the night. The change was disconcerting. Riddle's instincts, honed over years of paranormal investigation, tingled with suspicion. One evening, as Riddle was engrossed in his notes, he noticed a strange shift in the atmosphere. The air turned colder, the hairs on his arms stood on end. The familiar stench of decay hung heavier, a chilling premonition of what was to come. And then it arrived, the skinwalker's howl, tearing through the deafening silence. The howl was different this time, deeper, resonating with a malevolent power that sent shivers down his spine. It was no longer a mere announcement of its presence. It was a taunt, a chilling reminder of its looming threat. The howl was a declaration of war against their feeble attempts to curb its powers. The community plunged back into the abyss of fear, the brief period of peace a forgotten memory. The ordeal was far from over, and the enemy was far from defeated. Riddle felt a gnawing dread take hold of him. The stakes were higher, the danger more imminent. The protective ritual had only provoked the skinwalker, awakening a wrath that was now directed at the entire community. Haunted by the renewed terror and armed with the bitter knowledge of his failed attempt, Riddle dived back into his research. There was a missing piece to this terrifying puzzle, a crucial element that had eluded him. He knew he had to delve deeper into the skinwalker's lore to understand the creature better, to stand a chance against its terrifying power. As the nights echoed with the chilling howls, the days were filled with frantic research and tense anticipation. Time was no longer a measure of sunlight and moonlight, but a ticking bomb that held the fate of the Moonlight Reservation in its cruel grasp. With each passing day, the howls grew more frequent, more haunting. Night was no longer a time of rest. It was a period of tense vigil, where each sound sent a ripple of fear through the community. Sleep came sparingly and was often broken by the chilling serenade of the skinwalker's call. Riddle threw himself back into his research, his mind whirring ceaselessly. As he sifted through countless notes, books, and whispered tales, hunting for a glimmer of insight that could help them. His quest for knowledge was a beacon in the storm, a lifeline they clung to as the darkness crept ever closer. His breakthrough came from an unlikely source. One of the reservation's children, a young girl named Mika, approached him shyly one afternoon. In her hand, she held a weathered journal, the pages yellowed with age. It belonged to her great-great-grandmother, who had been a healer in her time. Riddle found himself drawn into the scribbled notes, the sketches of plants, and the narratives of healing rituals. Among them, a passage caught his attention. It told of a potent, yet dangerous, ritual, a rite that was said to break the skinwalker's curse and banish the entity. It was a desperate measure, saved for the most dire of situations. Riddle felt a spark of hope. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Riddle approached John. The elder listened intently, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He recognized the ritual from his childhood tales, a story told to instill fear and respect for the powers they were dealing with. The ritual was complex, demanding both physical and spiritual sacrifices. It required the participation of the afflicted Tom, who, until now, remained trapped in his withdrawn shell. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, but they were running out of time and options. As they prepared for the ritual, a tense silence fell over the Moonlight Reservation. The once vibrant community was now a shadow of its former self. its people strung tight with fear and anticipation. In the hushed whispers and the fretful glances, a single question lingered. Would this be their salvation or their downfall? Riddle couldn't provide the assurance they sought, for he himself was unsure. Yet he knew they had to try. As night fell, they gathered at the heart of the reservation, their faces ghostly in the flickering firelight. The next hours would decide the fate of their community, and the outcome of Riddle's most chilling investigation. As twilight fell on the Moonlight Reservation, an oppressive air of expectancy held the community in its grip. Around a bonfire that flickered wildly in the heart of the settlement, they assembled, faces etched with a curious mixture of fear, hope, and desperate resolve. Tom, now a mere shell of the man he once was, stood before them, his demeanor exuding a quiet resilience. Riddle and John, marked with the tribal symbols, stood by his side. The scene was as surreal as it was intense, a desperate last stand against an invisible yet profoundly malevolent entity. The ritual began with John's sonorous chants resonating through the silence of the impending night, his words carrying the weight of their collective hope. Riddle watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding a tattoo of trepidation and determination. He was their beacon in this storm, the thread linking them to a world that had failed to comprehend the nightmare they were living. As John's chants built in fervor, Tom began to react. His body swayed gently at first, then jerked violently as if trying to rid itself of an unseen force. His eyes glazed over, a primal fear etching itself onto his face. The sight was gut-wrenching, a chilling testament to the magnitude of the power they sought to combat. Then, slicing through the eerie symphony of John's chants, came the skinwalker's howl. It was louder, closer, suffused with a monstrous rage that set the very air quivering. Riddle felt the hairs on his neck stand on end, a chill running down his spine. This was it, the final confrontation. In the face of the skinwalker's wrath, John's chanting reached a crescendo, his voice unyielding, relentless. Riddle echoed his chants, adding his strength to the fight. Around them, the community watched in silent horror and hope, their fate hanging by a thread. Suddenly, with a deafening roar, the skinwalker's howl cut off abruptly. Tom's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back, then relaxed. An uncanny silence descended, punctuated only by the panting breaths of the participants and the crackling of the bonfire. As they looked at Tom, they saw a change. The haunted look had lifted, replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion, but in his eyes shone a spark of the man he once was. The oppressive aura of dread that had cloaked the reservation seemed to dissipate, replaced by a palpable sense of relief. In the quiet that followed, the Moonlight Reservation held its collective breath, daring to hope that the nightmare had ended. As the dawn broke, casting long shadows that danced around the settlement, they knew they had survived. They had faced the terror that stalked their nights and emerged resilient, their spirit unbroken. Riddle, the outsider who had become their savior, stood amidst them. Tired yet victorious, he knew his work here was done. He had delved into a legend that chilled the bones, faced an entity that defied understanding, and yet they had triumphed. His journey at the Moonlight Reservation ended with the rising sun. But the echoes of the haunting howl, the memories of the brave community, and the satisfaction of a mystery solved would remain with him long after. His encounter with the Skinwalker was a chilling addition to his legacy. As a paranormal investigator, a story that would resonate through his future endeavors, reminding him of the unseen horrors and hidden strengths that lay intertwined in our world. And thus, the howl in the night fell silent, and the Moonlight Reservation could breathe once more. But remember, our dear listeners, as we leave this tale behind and retreat from the unsettling realm of the Skinwalker, the echoes of its howl linger in our minds, a chilling reminder of the unseen corners of our world. Thank you for daring to journey with us through this haunting tale on our scary stories. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, fear is often only a story away. Until next time, good night, and let the shadows dance. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.